Politicians love to cut taxes, and we're about to engage in a big debate about President Trump's sweeping tax cuts. Leaked reports saying he wants to take down the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15% and also have lower rates and fewer brackets for individuals. And the problem with that kind of deep reduction, everybody likes to give the government less of their money, is it will blow a huge hole in the deficit, trillions of dollars over the course of a decade. I don't think most Americans care that much. Yes, if you took a survey, they'd say, oh, no, government has to live within its means and we can't spend money we don't have. But in practice, as a practical matter, Congress loves to do this. Now, Congress has rules, and House Republicans may not be crazy about passing a really big, fat tax cut that's not paid for, because when you have less revenue coming into the Treasury, even though I know supply-siders say that so much economic activity will be generated that it will compensate for that, inevitably you end up with more red ink. And so we'll see how that debate plays out. But interestingly, when he ran as a candidate, President Trump wasn't really big on talking about shrinking the deficit, because after all, he wanted to keep Medicare and Social Security spending right where they are, much more spending for the military, tax cuts as well, more money for VA. And so the president has certainly proposed some deep domestic cuts, but not necessarily enough to pay for these tax cuts. I don't think the deficit has mattered in American politics since Ross Perot ran in 1992. But here is what is changing, according to a couple of new polls. The country is becoming more comfortable with the idea of bigger government, and that's a sea change. So NBC News, Wall Street Journal poll, 57% the other day saying government should do more to solve problems and meet the needs of Americans, versus 39% who say government is doing too many things and they're better left to businesses and individuals. There's a Pew Research poll with an interesting finding. 48% say they'd rather have a bigger government providing more services. 45% a smaller government providing fewer services. First time in 8 years that has tilted toward let's have more government services. And I think a lot of this is tied to Donald Trump, because if you had, let's say, a Republican president who was more of a doctrinaire conservative, who talked constantly about smaller government, who talked about getting rid of whole departments and things like that, I think that Republicans and conservatives might have a different view. But this president, with a more populist approach, who wants to connect and provide jobs for, particularly working class Americans, and who wants to protect health care, he wants to repeal and replace Obamacare, he doesn't want anyone to lose coverage. That's a very different approach, and I think it has softened the views of those on the right, whereas those on the left were always sort of instinctively in favor of more government spending, less hot on tax cuts, especially tax cuts for the wealthy or the much better off. So this is a great debate to have, but this is the first time I've seen that needle move in some time, because usually, at least the politicians' rhetoric is, we need less government. We usually end up with lots of government, and we haven't been able to pay for it for many, many years. But now if some people are saying, hey, the government needs to do things, as in the Pew survey, on education, on infrastructure, on health care, on Medicare, we could be looking at a very, very different debate.